Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to continue on with our discussion of Unit 10 with global contemporary artists and dealing with identification or identity. And we're going to go ahead and pause the video right now to write down this topic, which is our next star image, which is Untitled number 228 from the History Portrait series by the artist Cindy Sherman. Now, Cindy Sherman, like many artists, started by studying very classically oriented modes of creating art, that being painting. In fact, she was started off as a hyper realist painter, but she became very bored with it and didn't really know how to say anything or express herself with it. So, like many artists, she started exploring new vehicles of expressing and creating art, that being performance art, video art, photography, installation, sorts. And she changed from painting to photography, although she does not consider herself a photographer. She considers herself first and foremost an artist. Now, to understand how she got here, we need to look at her earlier works. So let's dive into that. So, of course, we've already talked about this young woman right here, sharing in the shot, and her use of photography to create a sense of identity. Now, let's take a look at a more Western or fully a Western approach with Cindy Sherman. And this is Untitled Film Still number 21 for her Untitled Film Still series. Now, what's interesting about Sherman's work as an artist is that she went through some changes. When she first started doing photography as a form of painting or creating art, she started off using models, using friends, family, hired models, this, that, and the other. And she found that she couldn't concentrate with them. And more importantly, conceptually, she didn't feel right in pushing them into a situation or a pose or a way of looking, uh, because that's the way artists had done it up until that point. And by doing that, she felt like many other artists in the past had done, she was objectifying the model and quantifying them, making them into an object. So she started off in the 1980s, or late 70s, 1980s. She really got known in the 80s, using herself as a model, as we see in this film series, or excuse me, with her Untitled film series. And what she does here is she makes herself ever changeable. She's in constant flux. Like art is, every person has a different approach, opinion, or reaction to a work of art. And she wanted to take herself and, like art, change herself drastically. As you can see here, we look at these women and they all look fairly similar, but they all look very different. And the fact is that each one of them is Cindy Sherman. She wanted to make sure that she was the constant, that she was never changing. As an artist, she is the one fixed thing in her art. But the mode of representation, the meaning, the impression that um, she wanted to make non-static. She wanted that to be ever changeable. In this Untitled still film series, what she's doing is drawing from film noir characters, the old black and white detective style movies, and drawing from images of femininity to create dioramas almost, uh, create an oeuvre of socialized understanding of females during this time, societal expectations, societal reactions, but from a very feminine and not masculine point of view. She wanted to take women, place them in these situations where they seem vulnerable but defiant, and the exact opposite of an object of male desire. She wanted to move towards the female as representation itself, not an object. And let's move my head away so you can see this quote. I am trying to make other people recognize something of themselves rather than me. She is working with a genre of art that had pretty much gone dead in the 1950s, that of portraiture. Wow, excuse me. Portrait painting pretty much had died off, with the exception of people like Alice Neal, who were, and some a few California painters. Um, but she was able to reinvent the genre of portraiture by taking into it not an understanding of one person, but a understanding of a type of person or a gender. So let's read another quote by the artist, because sometimes it's best to understand an artist through their quotes. It's about whatever freedom I feel privacy gives me. Briefly in the 80s, I tried using friends and family and even hired an assistant to pose. And I felt like I just had to entertain them, be conscious of, quote, do you need coffee now? Are you tired? Do you want a break? And they'd be kind of giggly because they were being made up to look funny. I push myself, but I don't push other people. Or if I do, I'm apologizing because we're going too late or whatever. Having been being even having an assistant around, I'd feel self-conscious at times. I'd better look busy now rather than spacing out and just looking at images online or in magazines or whatever I might do. So by isolating herself, by using herself as the model, she's able to fully get into touch with what she's expressing outside of influence of others and societal norms and their influences. Now, eventually she turned to this history portraits, excuse me, series in which she would start using prosthetics, so you want to write that down, and costumes, posing as both male and female, in order to again express this ideal of the overabundance of a male perception in the art world. Let me move this so you can read. She wanted to build this idea of identity, identity that's always transformable. And again, the only thing that's constant is, of course, herself as the model. Um, she doesn't look anything like her pictures, as we see from Untitled Film Still series, Untitled Film Still series, and her Societal Portrait series. She is transforming herself to react and create this image of how society views identity. And she does that again with her Untitled History image series, where we see here Caravaggio's self portrait and her transforming herself again. She is the model into the painting. We see her doing this over and over again. I love this image from Jean Fouquet's Madonna and Child from the Proto Renaissance, where we have this very male understanding of the female anatomy, which is just, well, cattywampus. And Cindy Sherman's prosthetic response to that is just hysterical. Um, with this image here, she again is referencing other artists, specifically that of Sandro Botticelli and Cristofano Allori, and this female heroine in art. And you'll notice that she is posed here, dressed up. She's put on the makeup, and she holds not a real head, but a Halloween mask. Again, the Halloween mask or fright mask creates its own kind of meaning, its own kind of symbolism, where the man himself becomes kind of this archetype of danger and fear, and that is inscribed upon the female body or psyche. And of course, she's also referencing, and I'm going to just kind of tab out of this here, to, of course, Caravaggio again, and his work, Judith and Holofernes. So let's take a look here at that image. And again, like Arnolfoni's and Botticelli's work, we see here, if it'll load, an impassive woman. And like the others, there's a third person in the image, the maid, besides Holofernes. And if we look at his student's work, Artemisia Gentileschi's image, now of the same subject matter, we again see, finally, come on, man. We again see that image of the young Judith, the maid, and Holofernes. But whereas the other images, the woman Judith seems kind of passive, almost blasé. Artemisia Gentileschi's Judith is very much aware. She's very much not passive. She's very much active emotionally, psychologically in the image. Now, when we go back and look at Cindy Sherman's image, we notice the absence of the maid, the handmaid, because she wanted this to be about one female's identity and one female's reaction, one female's power and authority, as opposed to being encouraged or given strength from someone else. So by doing this, she's creating the facade that painting creates, that lack of reality, that imposed reality on a canvas, but only done in photographs. And she does something that's kind of interesting because the majority of these were done while she was living and working in Rome, surrounded by these paintings. But she never went to the museum to reference them. Instead, she looked at the images out of a book. Again, if you've ever seen the difference between a reproduction of a painting in a book and the real thing in a museum, you see that there is a certain life to the painting, a certain vibrancy to the painting that is not conveyed within the digital printed form. And when we look at her work, that over exposure of light and the drapery and whatnot, it loses its tactile lusciousness. It kind of flattens the image and makes it look fake, which of course it is. And that's one thing she's trying to get across with these images, that these are not true feminine identities, but imposed fake identities given to female subjects and models by male artists. She also appreciated seeing the images printed conceptually, because whereas these were paintings that were only seen by a few and the select, her work and work that is seen in books can be seen by anyone. Boop. Excuse me. Oh, I'm back. Um, when discussing this idea of engaging the viewer today, especially when it comes to things like TV and internet, she says, and I quote, "It's challenging to try to reach a jaded public, seeing God knows what in movies and television. We've become more callous to things than ever. How can art compete with television and movie images? It can't. It should incorporate it, use imagery as if it were from as if from those things. So she's trying to create this artificiality, not only that prescribed by the male artist, but also the artificiality we see in today's society. Now, here is Cindy Sherman herself from 2002, I think. And this is her image from 1981. And you can see that she rarely looks like her images. Now, another artist working with the idea of photography and identity is this guy here, Yusumasa Morimura, and his image portrait. And obviously, as you can see, he's referencing this idea of Monet's Olympia. Strike that, Manet's Olympia. And what he's trying to do is, again, confront this idea of identity. Identity as a male artist, identity as a male gay artist, and identity as a male Japanese gay artist. And confronting the Western stereotypes about Japanese gay men and Japanese culture as a whole. So you can see, you can see that he's confronting this idea of sexuality, promiscuity, and the likes from a Western ideal into his images. So we're going to pick up next time with another image. This is other works by the same artist, casting himself as female artists or images. And we're going to continue with this idea of global contemporary art. Make sure that you've written down the ID, answer the question, and make sure that you read the essay that I've attached alongside with this video. Thank you guys very much, and I'll see you all next time.